Right now, the costs of the COVID pandemic, social, economic, and educational, are coming into sharp focus with big moves by the federal government and at the local level. All of it aimed at mitigating those costs moving forward. Today, the CDC is expected to reveal changes to COVID rules that are designed to keep kids in the classroom and employees at work. Reportedly, officials are considering easing social distancing and testing requirements. It would be a dramatic shift for the federal government, and based on the fact that the U.S. has pretty robust immunity right now, and we know a lot more about the virus and how to treat it. The shift can't come soon enough for schools about to reopen in much of the country, with many of them facing critical teacher shortages. Exhausted and frustrated teachers are so fed up, a new teacher survey in Texas finds that 7 out of every 10 teachers thinks about quitting. That shortage is so acute in Texas, some districts are switching to 4-day-a-week school. To break all of this down for us, Anna Palmer is back with us. We're joined by Dr. Anne Rimoin, professor of epidemiology at the UCLA Fielding School of Public Health, and Ovidia Molina, the president of the Texas State Teachers Association. Good to see all of you. Dr. Rimoin, let's start with the basics. What does the science say? Is this the right time to roll back restrictions?
Well, the science says that when we have testing, when we have masking, when we have restrictions in place, we do reduce the number of cases of COVID that are occurring in classrooms. So, I think that we are in a situation now when we're dealing with what kind of the general feeling in pandemic fatigue is dictating versus what the science is saying.
Are you concerned at all that the changes might be being considered for political rather than medical reasons? Because that's always the question that gets raised, right?
Well, I think that it's a real balance at this point. We know from the data that if you have masks in place in schools, you're going to reduce the number of cases, which means there are going to be fewer sick days. There are going to be fewer sick days for teachers, fewer sick days for students. And that's really important. Same goes for testing. If you have situational awareness, if people know what their status is and they can stay home, isolate from others, you're going to reduce transmission. So, I think that the key here is there's a cost for everything. And we're deciding now as a society, what cost are we willing to pay and when?
Anna, speaking of the politics of all this, I think on the surface, the U.S. government under Joe Biden and Texas were about as far apart as you could get earlier in the pandemic. Now, the overarching theme of rolling back restrictions is trending in the same direction. Does this mean that the political fight over COVID that was so vivid and frankly pretty nasty for so long is over now?
I think that sorry.
Anna, sorry,
it's
Anna.
Not over yet, but I do think that it has come into sharp focus as we are coming closer and closer to the midterm elections. And if you look at Democrats and their concerns going into that midterm, it is this issue of how long they were masked, how long people were forced to stay at home, the fact that kids are going back to school, that parents are going back to work right now. There is a real, I think, fear that if these restrictions aren't rolled back, or if there is not a loosening, that Democrats could really pay the price when it comes to the ballot box.
So, Ms. Molina, I don't need to tell you, schools and teachers were often at the epicenter of these fights, and it was exhausting. First, as kids are preparing to go back to school, do teachers support the potential easing of requirements by the CDC?
Educators believe in the science. And so we are definitely going to ensure that we are continuing to support the science and make sure that we are supporting whatever is needed in our communities. The fight that we had here in Texas was that the governor was saying no masks at all. And we know that Texas is big and there were many different things happening in different communities. What we're going to continue to ask for is that communities have the control to be able to say what is needed to keep everyone safe. And so if that's going to be a fight, that's going to be a fight. We will follow CDC guidelines, but we want to ensure that our local school districts who have been elected to make sure that we're doing the best for our students have the power to do that.
Big picture, how important is it to get these kids back into the classroom, to give them some sense of normalcy, to give them a routine back?
Oh, it's highly critical. We want to ensure that our students are able to learn, they're able to understand that we have been through a pandemic, we are still in a pandemic, that we are a resource as educators, that we will be here for them to make sure that they get the support that they need, that they can ask us questions. We are not just fighting a pandemic, but we're also fighting political attacks that are hindering an honest education. We want to make sure that our children get everything out of education that they need to become successful adults in our society. And we will continue to fight for that. But it shouldn't be a fight for educators to do what's best for our students. That's the critical problem here in Texas.
Yeah, and the fight is exactly what we were talking about, how exhausting it has been for teachers. And your organization, the Texas State Teachers Association, as I mentioned, released that survey of Texas teachers. 7 out of 10 say they're thinking about quitting. This isn't just affecting Texas. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says nationwide there are at least 280,000 fewer public school teachers than there were before the pandemic. What needs to be done to address this?
What I know as an educator, we need the support of our elected officials. We need to make sure that our schools are fully funded. We need to make sure that we are paying our educators. In Texas, we make $7,000, a little bit more than $7,000 less than the national average. I say it all the time. Texas loves to be number one in everything. We need to be number one in valuing our educators and our students, because when we value public schools, we are making sure that our students get the best. And so ensuring that we have our teacher, educator voice in all the policies that have to do with education is a no-brainer. And that's why do we have to fight?
I need to interrupt. I'm sorry. Thank you so much, all of you.